Okay, thank you for coming. This is the July meetup, JS Monthly. I have put here the Wi-Fi if anybody wants to use the Wi-Fi. I love languages, so it's easy to remember. Some announcements before we start the meetup. We are going to be hosting a hackathon with a global travel company, Kiwi, on September. We're going to send an email with a link where you have to apply. It's going to be on a Friday, and it's going to last until the next day and Saturday. So not everyone can get in, so you have to get a confirmation from the company that they will organize it. It's a community thing, and they organize in different places at the same time, in Barcelona, in Belgrade, in Ljubljana, Zagreb. So all of them at the same time. It's a travel kind of hackathon. At this point, I would like to say thank you to Pusher for recording our talks. There is a playlist where you can find all the talks from all our previous events. So if you cannot make it one day, thanks to Pusher, we have the talks online, and you can go and watch them. If you miss something today, you can go back and watch them again. They are an API developer tool company. They scale and they do very interesting stuff. So have a look on their website. They have been sponsoring JS Monthly and Not User Group as well. So not just us and CityJS this year. I would like to say thank you to Bushu and X Matters. I'm gonna ask Katie to come and say hello. And also say a bit about where's the fire exits and all of that stuff. Thank you.
Hi guys, nice to see you all here. So this is our second meetup. We had one last year, which was really great. So thank you so much for coming. I'm really keen to support, all kind of events like that. So thank you for being here with us today. So I don't know if you guys know much about Buzu. So we are a language learning platform. We are worldwide. We started in Madrid 11 years ago and scaled up and relocated to London. So we have over 90 million users across the world. We're over 190 countries, so very busy, as you can imagine. Our teams are quite, working really hard, and my colleague Celia will tell a bit more about what we're doing at the moment. So yeah, we, as you can imagine, hiring. So if you guys looking for a job, just keen to learn more about us, reach out to me directly. My name is Katie Moore. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or go to our jobs, look at our website, and yeah, just feel free to apply. A bit of housekeeping. So fire exits are on my right, your left. Hope we don't need to use that, but in case. And toilets are also that way, if you guys need it. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you. And don't make the mistake to go in the toilets instead of going to the fire exit. Just a joke. Okay. So we're going to have 5 speakers, 4 talks. Because it's a lot of talks, we're going to split into 2 sets. So we're going to have the first 2 talks, and then we're going to have a small break. So first, we're going to have Eddie and Andrew from the Code Blasters. They are actually right now live streaming the event. So tweet if your friends want to watch it, if they were not able to come because there was a massive waiting list. I think first one is Celia, actually. So then it's Andrew and Teddy. Okay, Celia?
I want to hear how that sounds.
Great. I don't actually know how to put it in there. I'm trying.
Or you need
Ahora. Yeah. I need that.
to move it to the other screen.
It was working when I tried it before, I promise.
I was talking in the speakers. You can hear people mumbling. Speakers. Oh, I must have missed it.
Oh my god.
I want to hear how good it is, or how bad it is.
Give a big shout.
Hello everyone, this is me. I am Celia. If you can't tell, I'm originally from Spain, and I do actually love learning languages. That's why I'm here. I'm a front-end engineer in the web team. There's a few of the guys around there, so you can wave your hands if you want to, or not. I've been here for a year, but I've actually been living in London for over a decade. And before Busu, I was working at Moo, and even before that, I was working at Virgin Media. So I've had a bit of a random background, but I'm still at Busu because I really like it. A little bit about what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to talk to you about my team, who we are, what we do, the projects that we take care of on a day-to-day basis, and a little bit of the tech stack in case you want to join this exciting journey, and 2 relatively short stories. I won't go into detail, but you can ask me more about over a beer later. One of them is our biggest app we're migrating from Angular to React, and another one is about making sure that our states that we keep in one of the applications are actually immutable. But I'll get into that later, because Emerge.js is awesome. My team, we are between 4 to 5 engineers. Our numbers have changed over this past year. And we take care of 4 projects. 3 of them are outward facing, and 1 of them is an internal tool. We have a lot of internal stakeholders. I'll go through some examples of how we support them on a day-to-day basis. Our education team is actually huge. There are language experts, and they create all the courses where you can learn up to 12 different languages. Our marketing team, they create all the brand awareness and all the landing pages for the campaigns that we're going to have in the future. We take care of the CMS that they use to actually make these pages. The product team obviously has these ideas long-term on how to make Busu a better product. And the sales team, they focus more on partnerships with other companies or B2B customers that need loads of licenses to learn languages. So obviously, apart from the usual maintaining the tools healthy and releasing new features, we need to make sure that we're improving our apps at the same time. So I'm going to go a little bit through the 4 applications and then tell you the stories of how we're working to improve these. The first one, if you Googled Busu, is what we like to call the homepage. It's mainly all the landing pages that you would see on the campaigns when you click on Facebook or Twitter or just in general Google. It also has the registration flow and the login flow, and the cart and the payments. So that's for free users that want to become premium users. A little bit of the tech stack. It's sits on top of CMS that's graph-based, and it's in PHP 7. All of our services and helpers are ES6 based, and it's a static website. But as you can see from the screenshot, it's actually also responsive because most of the people nowadays like websites to look beautiful on big and small screens. Moving on to the next one, if you actually registered to use our application, this is what you will see on a day in, day out basis. Say you're very keen on learning Spanish, this is our web app. It's also responsive, and this is the one that I'll talk about more a little bit later. This is the one we're migrating from Angular to React. It's a single page app, and all of our services are currently in ES6, so that's really exciting. And we write tests in Jest. We're using Jests and Enzyme for our newly migrated React services and components. So you might be wondering, there's a lot of content there, there's a lot of languages as well. Where does it actually come from? Well, this is our internal tool. It's called Slate. It's the CMS that education team uses to create all of the content that you would see in 12 different languages. It's React-based, and we use Material UI because it has a lot of super easy to just drop in components that you don't necessarily need to create yourself. It's a single-page app as well, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about what we're doing to improve this one as well, because the state is stored in Redux and it's very complex and nested. But more on that later. And last but not least, we have the management platform. It's the sort of platform that you would use if you're a big company that want to buy, say, 1,000 licenses for your employees or your students to learn languages. So say a retail company based all over Europe, and you want your employees to be able to move from France to Germany to the UK. So this would be if you're a learning and development manager and you want to see the students are actually up to date, they're learning their Spanish at the rate that they should be learning. It's Angular 1.6 based, it's a single page app, and we write our tests using Jasmine. So that sets the scene. It's a lot to take in. I don't have much time. But now to the stories. The first story is around our web app. When I joined a year ago, I hadn't done Angular, but I learned a lot in this past year. And the team had set onto a journey to try and move away from Angular 1.6 because it's no longer, it's in long-term support. And they did a lot of investigation to see what, do we want to use Vue? Do we want to go to React? React was the winner because super popular and all the exciting things are happening there. Hiring was starting to get difficult for the guys to get someone else in their team, and also the app was not really performant. As the project grew, it hadn't really changed from the beginning. So it was just kind of falling behind. As well, the test suite was super hard to maintain because if you guys have written Angular tests, they're very slow to run. And it was just falling apart, all the test suite. And we wanted to actually make sure that the app worked as there were more features coming across. How are we doing it? When I joined the team, I was still coming to terms with how React and Angular could play around together, but the guys brought me up to speed super quick. And just to give you a little bit of an overview how we're doing it, we're going from bottom up, and we started migrating the most basic components with minimal dependencies, more like components that show things, to React. And we're using this library called React to Angular. It's super lightweight, it's very popular. And all it does is it creates a little Angular wrapper around the components, and then you can put these components into your bigger Angular parents, kind of as the picture shows here. We decided that all the new features were going to be written in React, so all the components and services. And then as time went on, it was getting easier and easier. In addition, we promised ourselves that every time we migrated things to React, we would actually write amazing unit tests so that our coverage was better, and also we could trust our app because it was getting a little bit not very reliable. So where are we at now? When I joined a year ago, we only had 10% of the code migrated to React. We're now at 65%. It's amazing. All of our services are based on ES6, and that's 40,000 lines of code, and 65% is in React. To put it into perspective, the journey has been super exciting, and I think everything is falling into place now. Maybe at the end of the year we'll have another talk and going into the pains and the happy times of what we went through as we were going through this journey. But if you have any more questions, I don't actually have any more details because it's a short story, but feel free to grab me after, or any of my team if you want anything else. Because I'm sure someone else is doing something similar here, or thinking about it. My second short story is based around Slate. This is our education CMS, React-based, and we store all our data in Redux. If you've used Redux before, you know that things can get really complicated very quickly, and with this application in general, if you can think about it, it's kind of structured as a book. So we have 12 languages, but every language has different courses, different levels, they also have different lessons and units, etc. So multiply that times 12. And you can see it starts, if you're saving your state as an object, it starts getting complicated very quickly. And we obviously want our education team to be able to trust this tool and use it on a day-to-day basis without accidentally causing some bugs that could break things. As an example, a little bit of a recap of what a reducer is. It's meant to be a pure function, takes in 2 arguments. The first one is a state, big object, and the action is meant to say or to show what you actually want to change. The fact that it's pure means that you shouldn't change the original state, but instead return a state with the changed properties that you want. And at first, when you look at this, you might not really know what is happening, apart from 3 levels deep, spread operators, meaning that you're actually not mutating the original one, and somewhere there, you're actually adding an object to an array. And this is just to add a label to an activity. This is not the most complex reducer that we have, but as the app grew and the necessities grew, we decided that we actually needed some library that was gonna help us make sure that all the things that were changing in the state as the users went around creating their courses wasn't necessarily going to make the state not be immutable and change things were not being meant to. I mean, I've already told most of the story. Mikkel Vestrate is pretty awesome dude. He wrote Immer.js. He also is part of MobX, one of the main guys. He went on and created this library, and it's super easy to understand. We also looked at Immutable.js, but the fact that it doesn't use normal JavaScript objects was starting to be a little bit difficult, but we tried migrating into it. So we tried Immer.js, and it was, I mean, as this shows, it's relatively easy to understand. You give it your state, all the changes are made in the draft, and it returns a completely new state with the changes that you want. It won't allow you to mutate the state if you actually want to, and it uses proxies in the background. I won't go into detail, but he's written a lot of really cool articles explaining how it actually works. All we do is we wrap our reducers with this function, called the produce function, that comes from the ImageArrays library, and it takes in 2 arguments, our state, and our producer function, which has all the changes that we actually want to make to the state. Going to the next slide. We've migrated 5 out of 16 reducers, not the most complex ones, and as far as it stands, the team can actually understand the code better. If we have someone new coming into the team, they'll actually know instantly what our reducers are doing in the really complex nested structure that we have in Slate. And going back to my first example, that's about 20 lines if you actually take all the rest of the stuff. It became 4 lines with the produce function. And I think it's much easier to understand. You actually know where you're going and what you're doing, and you don't have to be worried about human-prone errors, because humans do make errors when they write code accidentally. And if you're not convinced, even Dan Abramov, he wrote this, well, he retweeted this tweet in September 2018, and you know, he's like the main guy, one of the main guys for Redux, and even he's super excited about it because it simplifies everything so much. I encourage you to try it. It's made our lives way easier, and it's an ongoing journey. Hopefully, we'll get to the end of it relatively soon. That's me. I don't have anything else to tell you today, but if you have any questions, any doubts, any ideas, I do hope it inspired you or it resonated with you, some of the stories. We're also hiring in my team and in Busu in general, so if you're interested in taking on these awesome journeys, just give me a shout. Thanks.
Do you have any questions? What's here? Yeah, no. Okay, no questions, but I would encourage you, so if your company, your team, or you yourself are like struggling with anything and like encountered some of the similar problems that she or her team did, I can encourage you just to like talk to each other or to her, because it will be a really good thing like to see how somebody like solve the same problem that you have. Maybe you have an idea to solve it in some other way, and like you can discuss the solutions and different things. And it's a really good thing. Like that's what we're here for. All right, thank you, Celia, once again.
Cheers.
We're just waiting for the audio. Everyone wave. Actually, have we got? That's not ready yet. Okay, so everyone say JS Monthly. JS Monthly. That's for my vlog. Thank you very much. Is this on? You ready? Well, that's quite long. We need to be mildly. Okay. Should I go first?
Mike?
We wrote this today in a hurry, and we focused too much on it looking pretty, and we didn't time it. So, Aris, can you kind of wave like halfway through and 3/4 and so on? So, pipeline-driven development. It's actually perfect because if following on from the last talk, we mentioned we're using Angular in our example, so that works out I think quite well. Your turn.
Well, what it is Firebase and Cypress as well. Angular is a small part of what we're going to talk about. We're going to look a bit at what do you do when you're building up a pipeline. How do you set yourself up, I'll say, for success? But what are some of the things you can do, and how do we actually do that? So we're going to talk at a very high level. Obviously, you can get really deep on this stuff, but we haven't got time for any of that. By all means, talk to us after if you want to know more. So we're going to talk at a high level on how you set up Angular, Firebase, Cypress, and get yourself that initial pipeline all set up so you're nice and smooth going forward.
Pipeline, by pipeline we mean the full to deployment, all the way from beginning to end. So we're going to use Circle CI as an example for this as well.
Oh,
Yes, so we're from the Code Mortals team. We're live streaming here tonight, so support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel. We'll really appreciate it. Should we go? Who's first? I can't remember. Is that mine? It's Angular. So who here has used Angular before? Who here prefers Angular? No, true, no, I'm joking. Right, okay, good. So, you know, that's for the live stream who can't see the people in the audience, that was 100% love Angular. I'm joking. It's about 50%. Okay, so Angular's by Google. These are all the great things that it does. You've probably seen it on its website. We think it's really good. I have used React. I've only used Vue a little bit, so I can't compare. So a whole lot of points we practiced and I've forgotten. I think you should jump in.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots you can do with Angular, right? So it's cross-platform. Likewise, React has their comparisons. By cross-platform, they're saying things like you've got Ionic available, so you can build a mobile app, a PWA, a website all out of one code base. They focus a lot on performance these days, so they do a lot of tree shaking. When you build up your minified JavaScript, it will remove anything that you're not using. Even if you've got those libraries available, it will just remove all that and bundle up the smallest thing possible. And certainly with Angular 8 and the new Ivy engine, even better still. They focus a lot on productivity. There's a lot of built-in CLI tools you can use that just generate code for you. And yeah, it's designed around a full development lifecycle. So when you set up a project, you will have Jasmine in there, you will have Protractor, which runs on Selenium in there. We're going to talk about how we set things up differently, because whilst those come out of the box, we think there's a smoother way you can do things that make development more enjoyable as well when using Angular. Next slide. Okay, so we're very quickly, no, you've gone too far, go down. Oh, sorry. There we go. So getting started, so if you want to set up an Angular project, one line, we need to install Angular globally. After that, you run a simple command, ng new, in this case Code Mortals, because we're using the example of our website through some of this. There's questions, it will guide you through. There's only about 3 or 4 questions you get asked. The first one will be, do you want routing? So if you want multiple pages effectively, so we say yes typically to that, because it's very rare you build a website that is truly just one page, but some people do. We then like to use CSS for doing our CSS work. At which point you've got a project working, so you just change into that directory, we run npm start and go to the browser, and that would be what you will see. That's it. It's as simple as that to get an Angular project up and running for anyone that hasn't used Angular. Everyone seems a bit scared of it these days, but it really isn't difficult. At which point we can move over to the CI. So that was all we're going to say on Angular. It's literally just, this is all we're doing. So we're setting up the basic pipeline, right? So we have a working project now. You can see it on the internet if you wanted to, but you're not yet deploying it anywhere. You've just got a project that's running on your machine. So what do we do next?
So the next thing we would do is set up our CI. So we've got a hello world, we haven't put any business logic in there, we haven't put any custom designs, it's a hello world project. And the next thing we would do on a project is set up CI. Does everyone know what continuous integration is? A lot of people nodding, okay, awesome. So again, for example, we've used Circle, and you'll see some Circle shortly. But it's the kind of the automation engine of your entire pipeline. It will do so much more, and I won't give too much away, but you'll see that coming up shortly. But we find it makes the team work so much better together because you're getting frequent, kind of feedback all the time. Every time you do a commit and a push or raise a pull request, you're getting that feedback all the time. It's really, really important. And there's so much many more things you can do on CI, but again, I won't give that away. We'll save that for later. But we find it just allows us to develop faster as a team, and we get a lot of, I guess, less issues, less defects, less conflicts with our short-lived branches. I won't go into the whole branching discussion, but we'll have to talk about that afterwards. What have I forgotten on the slide? That's about it, really, I think. Yeah. How are we doing on time? We're good.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want.
Go on then. So yeah, I'm just talking through the points very quickly. So simplifying team processes. If you've got a CI in place, you're sort of embracing standard practices. You're doing pull requests most likely. The pull request will be coming back saying, yes, this has all gone through the tests. Don't worry about running it all on your local machine. And just make some of those steps a bit easier for you. The feedback, obviously, every single branch, we set it up that every branch will run the full automation suite. For example, we have a few clients with reasonably complicated projects, but the whole thing runs in sort of less than 5 minutes, typically. And that will be sort of 1,000+ tests typically running. It upgrades your project confidence. I mean, we're talking about the stakeholders involved in your projects and all those people. Everyone can see it's happening all the time. Build up confidence, yeah, okay, you see the occasional failure, that got caught, great, and so forth. And you can iterate on that and improve it. And yeah, delivery overheads. I mean, a lot of people focus and think, oh, if we're going to introduce tests and all this other complicated stuff, it's going to take us so much time. But it really doesn't. I mean, we probably have 10-15% overhead to just maintain this on top of all the work you're doing. That includes writing all the updated tests and everything else. It's only about 15% of our time goes into making sure this is all there and working. And the rest of our time we can focus on building that functionality up.
But don't take our word for it. We're gonna show you. So don't take our word for it. We will show you. We've got some videos we recorded earlier on today, so it should be good. Am I doing this as well? Oh, I prefer Travis CI. You do Circle.
Okay, so for anyone that's used Circle, there's basically 2 main things to worry about. You have jobs and workflows. The jobs are basically the scripts you want it to run, and the workflow defines how you want those scripts to be executed one after the other, whether they need to wait for other things. So on the next slide, an example of a very simple job might be to build your code. So we're going to have an image, and there's loads of Docker images out there, so we'll come with lots of them. In this case, you can run a node image. We can first check out the code, do an npm install, and run a build. That could be your most simple script to get you started. Now you're just building the code. You know, does this create a minified document? Do you get any errors coming up? Other things you can do, you can build docs. I mean, we build README, or should I say manuals within here. And those manuals, we want to automate that and get those building every single time. So you can put all these things into your steps. You don't have to focus purely on writing tests. There's a lot more we see that a CI can give you. All mixed up. And again, a simple workflow could literally be build the code, build the docs, runs those both in parallel. So you don't have to wait for one or the other. Obviously later on we will show a little bit more of a complicated CI, but then Circle gives you this. You get to see every workflow that builds through, whether that's succeeded or failed, and that can be notified. We notify on things like Slack. You'll see errors on there. And in more detail, so you can drill into that. And you can keep drilling in. We won't show any more slides on that because it takes too long. Let's go on to something more interesting. How do we actually get this deployed?
you've been practicing. I didn't practice my slides today. So who here uses CI? No. Yeah, so people know what it is. A lot of people use it, that's great. Who here does CD, continuous delivery? Who deploys from their CI? Well, a few hands have gone down, but still looking good. Even if you don't go all the way to production, it's still really good to at least go, one before. Obviously, ideally production would be best. So, whatever CI platform you're using, you can add an extra step that if it's a certain branch, you can then deploy out. So, if you're in a feature branch and it's building on CI, you probably don't want that to deploy. Although for some of our clients, we do deploy to a whole production-like environment, but that's a separate story. So when it gets merged into, say, develop, then you'll probably go to a development environment, and you might have a staging branch, goes to staging, when you go to master, it goes to production. This allows us to deploy with ease, with confidence, that anyone who's got the permission can just merge a pull request into the right branch, and it automatically gets deployed. So therefore you can protect it for certain people, and also it's repeatable, it's fast, you know roughly how long it's going to take, because it might increase over time as you add more things to your automated test, as you add more steps to your CI. For example, we mentioned a few earlier, automated test, but you also get things like, okay, we run lint, automated test, you might even run performance tests, you might run accessibility tools to do all those sorts of checks. And we've got I think, a slide for that in a bit, so I won't go into too much detail. And it enables a change, I think is really important. So it's repeatable, and people are confident to make little changes and often. So if you deploy every week, if something goes wrong, then hopefully it shouldn't, because you've tested it in production-like environments all the way up. But if it does, you can easily just roll forwards. I don't understand why people roll back. It's 2019. You just make a quick fix, hot fix branch, however you do it, and then deploy it out 10, 15 minutes later. Because with the automated tests, you're going to get a full regression sweep one every time. If I miss anything, I'll practice that one a little bit.
No, that one's done. You want to go on to the next bit? Firebase.
I'll do Firebase, sure. So we're using Firebase as to host our site. It's by Google, it's pretty good cool. I use it a lot of hackathons. We've used it for a few clients, mostly GCP and AWS, or even GitHub Pages if it's a static site. But the principles are still the same. It is, you could get your CI to deploy straight out. But this is how simple it is. So when people say, oh, I haven't got time to do CD, it is so simple. You're going to have to do this locally on your machine. And when you get someone else to join, they're going to have to do the same. And it's not, you have to do that, but it's not so repeatable, and you can't check it. Someone else might do it different, might get a different version. Whereas if you've got it in your CI, then it makes it better. So just install Firebase tools. You log in, and it will open up a browser. You can just log in with your Google credentials, and you initialize your project as a Firebase project. It will be just selecting hosting, but you can tick all the other if you want real-time databases and all the rest. And then if you've got multiple projects, you can either pick the project you've got, if you've created it via the UI, or create a new project. Really, really, really simple. I think that's just the, so that's it.
Pick which directory you want to be deployed out.
Yeah, we use dis by default. That's what Angular deploys out, compiles to. So yeah, pick the directory. If it's single page app, index to HTML. That's it. Like literally, this whole process takes minutes. It's great.
So it just creates those two files as well. So that's all you get at the end of these two files.
Sorry.
So at the very end, where you get two files created. So there's a Firebase JSON and the RC file. And that's it. It says it's done. Obviously, you can have a look inside those two files. It will show you what's been set up. But they really aren't complicated files. You can manually edit them and create them. There's not a great deal to them. If you do want to see some of these files and how they run, obviously all the stuff we do is open source. You can check out our GitHub website project, and you'll see it all on there if you want to see what goes into those files without setting it up yourself. But it really is as simple as running one command and answering the questions. Finally, when it comes to the CI, when you do want to put this to a continuous integration server, you will need a token. Firebase has a method for doing that. You just run Firebase login CI. It will generate a token, it'll bring on a web page first, and then, as an example at the bottom, that's all you need to run is Firebase deployed with that token from your CI. I think the next section is yours. I'm just going to say we've got 15-minute warning. Is 15 minutes left, or we've done through 15 minutes?
You have a bit more time.
Okay, cool. We'll get to the Cypress stuff. I know Aris is really keen for us to show the Cypress stuff. So we can talk about this is our CI, the image that we're using, some of these steps. We just added a few more steps in. So before you might have seen right at the beginning, it was building. Now we're adding it to deploy it, or to use this key, and then to deploy the code. And that's really it. That's how simple it is. Every project needs to start with hello world, CI, CD, and all those great stuff. I'm going to keep banging on about that. What we got next?
And there's the workflow update.
That's too complicated.
Okay.
Skip it, we haven't got time.
Okay.
You can just add more and more. This is your section, I can have a break now.
Cypress, okay. Yeah, so we've been using Cypress for probably a year now, right? We used Selenium, Protractor, and a few other things in the past. They were great, but we had lots of stability issues. Certainly, when we moved from Angular 1 through to the latest versions of Angular, Protractor is really unstable. It's not built for the latest version of Angular, even though by default it comes out of the box with that. So we tried a few things, Nightwatch, WebDriver IO, but we settled on Cypress because it was really stable, really easy to use. Whilst there are some limitations, like you can only run it in Google Chrome, they're working on that, they're going to improve that, but to be fair, if it works in Google Chrome, that's all we care about. So anyway, it's fast, it's reliable. So we've got test suites that have 1,000+ tests, and they all run in a matter of minutes, really. It doesn't take long. It's a bit slower on the CLI, to be fair. So if you are running it locally on a desktop, you will probably see it runs a bit quicker, which is interesting. It does real-time reloading, so if you wanted to just run a particular feature file, you just work in one area, you can monitor that as you make the changes to the code. It will just keep on rerunning that in the background. You can see you're getting it better or worse. It also supports time travel. You'll see we've got a little video in a minute. When you run the test, you can click back to the history and actually look and see what's going on. You can then even open the inspect console, see everything that was going on at that point in time. So even if all your tests have run, they've taken a couple of minutes, you can go back to the first test, see what actually happened, and follow that through manually by clicking down the interface, which is quite cool. And obviously, it's all there for continuous regression testing. You should be always regression testing. There's no reason in today that you wait to the very end to regression test all your code. People still talk about it because they're stuck in the past. But the reality is, regression testing, you can do it all the time. You don't need a big manual process to run it all. You really can do it with Cypress.
That's the video.
And then we're on the video.
Where's my mouse? There's no play button.
Maybe
That play?
yeah, that looks like it. Go on, do it.
I can't press any harder. Wait, take a refresh. Try again.
Might be loading that video.
It was quite a big video. We can talk through it. Oh, you can see it. Just repeat. Yeah. Don't need to. Left disabled. I'm going to press it. It's not working. No, it's disabled.
So we cheat and grab the code from it and
We've got less than 10 minutes.
We have.
So while you're doing that, let me chat. So also some other benefits of using a tool like Cypress, let me move out the way so you can see, is when it's running on CI and it's running headless, it also records videos. So if something does go wrong, it takes screenshots, just like Protractor and Selenium, but also records videos so you can actually watch the video being played, which is actually really interesting. If something fails in CI and you can't replicate it locally, you do get a video of the tests running, which we're hoping to show you, if not, it's in the repo. Again, our slides, I can talk about our slides really quickly. They're open source and on GitHub. So we've coded our slides. So if there's anything wrong with our slides, any typos or any mistakes or anything else you'd like to add, then please send a pull request through. We're using the Reveal.js framework.
Downloading.
downloading it.
Bottom left.
Is it finished?
Next one.
Yeah.
Oh, almost done.
Okay, I've got my downloading.
It's done. That's
Sorry, I've actually got a couple of copies of this. Let's open up the end.
on screen.
Yeah, hang on, I'm trying to bounce.
You can talk. This is my contribution, this little lady on the right hand side. That did take me like 10 minutes. So this is what it'll look like on CI. When it's running on CI, this is what it'll look like. And in a second, it will switch to the UI. This is what you would see on your UI. Sorry, locally, when it's running on your laptop, you'll actually see it running through the steps. And you can see the steps down the left. You can jump back in time, as Andrew said. And you can even inspect, okay, it's got this, what's next, but you can even inspect the console to see what's happening to the code at that particular time.
Can you see that again one time?
Sorry?
See it again one time?
See it again? Okay, it was like 20-second video.
It goes so quick.
As long as Aris isn't throwing anything at us, I think we're okay for a few more minutes. We're almost done now, I think, anyway.
Got a few more bits on it.
I'm just lying down. But yeah, it's pretty cool, and it's going to run, like Andrew said, it can run 1,000 tests in about 5 minutes, and then we do another 3-4 minutes to a deployment. We do deployment to GCP at the moment.
Awesome. Mouse.
Slowly. There we go. Okay, next one.
So what do you do to set it up?
This is yours, I think, setting up.
Oh,
you love this stuff.
Yeah, well, Cypress is, again, as everything is, an NPM install. Cypress, we use Cucumber with Cypress, and we're going to talk about, a little bit about why we're using Cucumber with Cypress. So Cypress is great. There's lots of really cool stuff you can do, but if you're just writing it raw from their docs, it can become quite a pain to maintain. But yeah, all you need to set it up is literally install it. We have a couple of scripts, we just pop them on there. We run a build, we start it up, and then once it's started up, you can run Cypress either. Cypress run will give you the CLI, or open will give you the interface on the desktop. This is what a typical Cypress test would look like if you were not using Cucumber. So this is more Jasmine driven, so you can see you're doing a describe at the top, we're saying user authentication. We're going to do a successful user login. The first thing it does is visits the login page. It grabs the form element. We then grab each of the inputs.
To get the idea, skip. This is what you don't do. This looks awful. Let's move to what you do.
But it does work.
It does work, yeah.
But Cucumber, on the other hand, we get the gherkin syntax with this. So by gherkin, we're talking about a given, when, then. So given there's a precondition, when I perform some kind of action, then there's going to be something that happens.
Does anyone use Cucumber? A few people.
Some hands in the room every time. Yeah, so by comparison, we can write something that looks like this to the user. Benefits here, obviously, are if you're talking to the business, they can read this, they can understand it, whereas if I'd given them that previous script, they'd look at it and probably just walk away. So we want to have a conversation with them, we don't want them to walk away. But yeah, by writing this, we can say, okay, we're going to go to the login page, we find the username field, we put a value in there, we find this password field, login button should then become enabled, click it, page opens. Likewise, we can do pretty much the same thing for the SAMP path. So if you look, all those steps are the same, because I just jump between those. The difference being that we put a different password in that's not valid, and we have a different condition we're expecting in the end. We're staying on the login page, and we're seeing a message to say that the credentials are bad. What sits behind that? Well, it's still Cypress behind that, so every step definition you do still have to add a bit of code. So in this case, we've got an example just of opening the page up. So when I open a particular page, so now we can reuse that step. We can put any URL we want in as a replacement for that string. It's just a regular expression at the end of the day. And it will visit that page. Likewise, for each of these steps, there will be a bit of code behind each one, a couple of lines long. The nice thing there is, as we want to do more things, like we could add an additional check within this page to actually validate, did you get to that page? So you can iterate on each of these steps as well, and everywhere you've used that step will benefit from it straight away. So yeah, Cucumber, pretty awesome, makes life really simple, reusable, and if there is a major upgrade to Cypress that occurs that changes the name of things, all you're doing is updating step definitions. I think on our project, one of the most complicated one has maybe 50 step definitions that we use in there. There's not many, but it can drive 1,000 tests from that, and people can read those tests. So some of the benefits, already mentioned a few. But do you want to talk through them? I've talked quite a bit just there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, everyone can read that, so I'm probably not going to just read it out. I was quite keen to build on what you were saying a second ago, which is it bridges the gap between the tech and non-tech. So, I mean, even in some projects, we've gone as far as having the business analyst, when they want to make changes, also business analysts would write some of those gherkin syntax, and we would just bring it into our project, and then we'll run the tests, and we'd get like 10 failures, and one by one we'd make them pass, and we know we've satisfied what they want. And if they do want any changes, if you've got, I guess, a business analyst or product owner who's a little bit more technical, they can just, hit edit button on GitHub, change if after you log in, for example, they don't want to go to the accounts page, they want to go to a dashboards page, they can hit edit on that test file and just change where it goes, and submit, create a PR. And it's going to fail. And then I know I've got a PR to make go green, I can upload the code to make that test pass, and then when the client's happy, they can merge it and just deploy straight out to production. I mean, you can just keep it really, really slick, depending on how many layers and what kind of, BS and stuff you have. But yeah, you can keep it simple and slick and little and often. But yeah, I think that's it. It's just we use it a lot now over the last quite a few years, and it's just made our lives a lot easier and really pushed the gap. What else have we got? So yeah, automate everything is what we want to say. It's the bottom line. So on CI, as I mentioned before, or we've mentioned functional tests. I mentioned earlier on, you can do performance and accessibility. You can also add security. There's like OWASP, you've got Z attack proxy, and all other bits and pieces you can add to your CI. And we've mentioned deployment. So you can keep building on your CI, and then with Circle CI, which Travis can't do, is you can do things in parallel. So I think you should saw those two boxes. You can actually have a whole kind of, we should have taken on a picture of one of our more complicated ones. You have a whole spider diagram where you can't continue past a certain gate until all these have passed. Say for example, deployment won't happen until all these agree, and then it would happen, and so forth. So you can have all this great stuff. But yeah, automate everything. Automate yourself out of the job. Definitely, that's what we try and do, right? Absolutely. Do we have time for Q&A?
Yes.
We've got one more slide.
Well, we've got one
Any
slide,
questions?
but that was, we have this one. That's just really, there are other things to think about.
I want to talk about this one because I think TypeScript's amazing. You should always use it. Andrew really likes this last one, so I'll let him say a few words on that one.
That was put there as mostly a case of, read the documents, but documentation, it varies so much. We have a great struggle with third-party documentation. So if you do work and build APIs, third-party APIs for other people to consume, make your documentation open source so we can fix it, because the number of times I've used documentation that is wrong, out of date, or just really difficult to follow. But read it anyway, because if you don't read the documentation, you don't find some of the gems, and you learn a lot by reading it and having problems as well. But
Let's add one more to that. And if you find a mistake in open source documentation, just raise a pull request, just fix it. And if you figure something out, like if it went from step 1 to 2, and there's like a step 1.5 that kind of, it's easy when you know how, but if you don't know and you struggle on it, just add that back. The amount of open source contributions I've made, which are just adding in like a hidden step, which I think most people just assume it's easy, or the authors of the project assumed it was easy, but when you come to use it, it's not. And then that will just help your open source contributions, helps the community, and like I always say, helps you find your next job or more money. That's what different conversations are. Questions? No more? Any questions? They're playing with the mic. I can run around with this. I can throw it. No, it's joking.
You can repeat my question. I was wondering why you opted for Firebase, because I read a few analyses, and apparently when you grow a lot, it becomes more expensive with some other competitor. I know it's a happy problem when you grow enough, so that already might be an answer. But I also know that it's not too easy, as many other versions, to say, okay, we grow so much, now it will be more economical to do so Azure, to AWS, and so on. In the case of Firebase, you really needed to refactor a lot. So I was wondering what was your train of thought when you decided to go in that direction?
I think I can answer this one because Andrew, well, you're welcome to answer. Andrew didn't want to use Firebase for this demo, he wanted to use AWS or GCP. So it's just for the demo. We actually really don't use Firebase for our clients. So I haven't built any huge scale projects on Firebase, we use AWS.
I need to add to that, we do sometimes use it. I wouldn't say we don't. When you're prototyping and you're in the early phases and you're doing the proof of concepts and the user base is low, Firebase is really easy, it gets you going. Actually, we recently did have one project that then jumped from Firebase. It jumped so quickly in use, we had to move somewhere else. We actually moved to GCP storage with a load balancer on the front. It took about half a day to make that transition, and deployments, URLs, it wasn't that difficult. It does depend on your project though, it really does. So if you've really got a very complicated project and you're running lots of microsites on the front end, I mean, on the back end, we're not necessarily running Firebase or for a lot of them. We use Firestore for stuff. Firestore's quite cool for real time. But it really varies on your project needs, as you say. There's not one shoe fits all. You've got to think about your project, think about the user base. But for a small project, getting started, improving things, Firebase is really good, and it is cheaper that way.
Any other questions?
Hello. Could you tell us a little bit more about the challenges on using Cypress, especially in comparison to good, old, but sometimes annoying Selenium?
So I think I want to say one thing, I want to pass it to Andrew, because one thing that comes to mind when people say that is, I want cross-browser from Selenium. I want to be able to use Selenium Grid, go cross-browser, use tools like what's source making? I can't think of the site where you can kind of farm out, takes videos of all the mobile devices, all that. Source Labs. Source making, that's pretty close. But how often do projects actually go grid and go cross-browser? A lot of the time, I think 9 times out of 10, most projects have just used pick one browser, Chrome, the fastest one usually, because they want their test suite to run really fast. So, yeah, that's my answer. And I know Andrew's got some passionate thoughts on the subject here.
There's always problems. Everything's got problems. There's no idea. I think some of the problems that we've had, responsive stuff, whilst you can have different configs for Cypress and say different breakpoints and all the rest, you don't necessarily got all the mobile headers in there and things like that. So if you do want to do all the cross-browser, responsive stuff, and you've got a big need for that, then perhaps Cypress isn't quite ready yet. They are doing a lot of work to get into that space, but they're not ready yet. One of the bigger problems, well, I suppose, I don't think this is Cypress specific, but mocking data. So a lot of the time on the front end, we like to run a test suite that just mocks all the back end. You can do that. They have fixtures that you can run and just load and interact with the network on there. That works quite well. When we're doing stuff with Firestore, so on our local website we've been building for Co-Immortals, we're using Firestore. That was really fun trying to get the fixtures to work. We looked at different ways of doing that, but we managed to get something working. It was by very much manually inspecting it. But that's a problem you get everywhere else. So are there any real problems that I've had with Cypress? I'd say I haven't actually experienced anything that's been that problematic. It's been fairly smooth running for the last year. I couldn't say there's anything apart from the questions around cross-browser that come up. Everything else, it runs on CI fine, it runs locally fine, it's quick. I haven't really hit anything that I'd say has been a major blocker for any client that's had a particular requirement that I need this and you haven't got it.
What else?
We can have the rest of the questions in the pub.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
We have talks. Okay, we're going to have a 5 minutes to break, and we're going to come up with the next 2 talks.
There's some more pizza left, so you haven't got
In the fridge.
How long will it Viv. Hi. Nice to meet you. I'm going to run. Are you going to run? Yeah. There's like these bits from Washington. Especially when you're not that tall as well. My feet hanging up or one or the other.
Yeah, we're going to leave the bag here. Your one was easy. Your one was easy, so Nick's angle of well, are you going to bounce or? Basically,
I do like Firebase.
well, I told you to use it.
No, until you mentioned it. It was literally 6 months ago. Christmas time. Why don't you start this? It's really strange. Have a look. You can do so much. You've got machine learning, AI, you've got UI handling, real-time data entry, lots of like store. What else have you got in there? I mean,
yeah, it's really trendy. Are you alright?
And the tips and stuff.
It sounds like it is, or do you want to change it?
Private, wow!
So does that Gherkin actually like do does that thing do express everything that you need it to? Because it kind of looks you can do whatever you want. It sounds to you it's not an out of the box humanity, although we are thinking doing that. Probably put a live
We can use some more initially. I look around here.
Doesn't that bring in an extra problem that you might not be necessarily sensible to next
So between for example, with the
yes, first, and then we do it because I keep for the very end. If you already know, then I can still make your
that's like, there's always one in the next let's go and
the input for this one way today, you want to just make sure that all your inputs across your whole site are consistent with how they look. So within that 1%, you have that red when you have an error. So you've got one line of code, it's got 50 lines long. Everywhere you
but they're quite simple tests, so that's a technical statement, but like I noticed that like given you're doing something you're expecting.
That's what you need, there's three.
Yeah, no, but if you like it maybe, I mean like you define the words given and then
No, given, so the term like they come from.
that's the Gherkin language. There's a few other things as well. Given when how it's readable, so given like available and I want to have when I then perform some kind of action, when I
there's always a condition, and then there's always
we have things like setting up data as well. We have set up like background when you got to it. So you might say, okay, I want to make sure there's some data on each time. So it's the data has to every single day. Quite a feature file for integration. When you have feature file, we don't have access to deal with how our dashboard is going to work. So both the leaks and data is behind it. We have background where we insert those in the database, or we often have the structure stuff like that. We can inject things into the database from there, populate the database with content, we've got available, loads of stuff like that. It can get quite complicated to get further and further down the channel. But it makes it so much simpler when you everything.
anyone who joined the team, so when I joined Angular on Twitter, I didn't even look at it. You type in your ID, given I'm on 40, it comes up. I'm on given, I'm on.
Oh my god, take a picture of it.
It's my understatement. Given I have this spreadsheet, given I have, and I'm already given come up. I just joined the team and start that. No, that's really dope. That's what we want to do. So they have.
We've looked around a few times. The problem we can do this is so I don't know what we have certain things that I show you like that in accessibility. So when you build an accessibility website, then you should have fairly standard accessible tags. Try and drive chances are that class is there are some areas that maybe
but yeah, I mean, the simpler you take the language, the more box you can take.
We do live streaming.
Technology.
25 minutes. It's really hard. You want like 10? I'm like, no, it'd be like an hour. Like seriously, just skip over.
It's just a taste of it.
You don't know. You certainly haven't. To be honest, I eventually probably more. I mean, it's also when you install, I don't know how it's going to make.
nice choice inside. Same concept, it's on top of the tier that allows you to basically design the formal functions, so you don't need like extra. Whatever you're doing, it's nice. Again, I don't know how it works. So I don't know if the translation works. It's easier than it sounds. Like the steps and then you have to
generally kind of want to read this month, we're a little bit busy, so we're going to try and start trying new things.
what exactly are you? Are you like if you're a company and you have customers?
Yes, I'm not sure.
Guys, we're going to start in 5 minutes.
Hey man, hey right? That's a familiar face, I know, right? Good, good. I know.
Guys, can you see? We're going to start now.
Sorry, I'm going. My back. No, the other.
Hello.
Still coming through? Yeah. I'm just going to stay on top.
We're going to go to a pub afterwards, the Singer Tavern. And if you want to talk more and ask questions, come there, have a drink. If you don't want to have a drink, you just come there and just chat. Okay, I'm going to introduce our second sponsor for today. We get sponsors every 3 months. We are fully booked until November, sponsors, but we do get sponsorships for funds for speakers. So we're trying to bridge societies from this, for example, from Holland to London. So you don't have to go to Holland. We just bring the speaker here and he talks to you. So, for example, today. And so X Matters have helped us do that. And I will give the mic to Richard to say a bit about X Matters.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Richard. I come to these things every so often, I've done for years, but I'm absolutely thrilled that my company was, when we suggested that they sponsored Next.js meetup, they said, what do they do? Yeah, sure, we're absolutely in that ballpark. So you've probably never heard of X Matters. I really don't want to take your time up too much from the real content, so I'll tell you, I think, 5 things about it. The first and most important thing is that there is a free trial, so you can have a go, and if you work in a DevOps team and you've got up to 10 users, it will be totally free because forever, always. Second thing you should know about it is that there's a lot of cool built-in things for DevOps teams, but if you want to expand on what X Matters does, JavaScript is the scripting language. So you guys have got a way head start when it comes to expanding it and doing more cool things with it. Thirdly, we have a whole bunch of interesting X Matters stickers, pens, freebie stuff on that table over there, so please do help yourself. And finally, what on earth does it do? It's the kind of thing which is similar to PagerDuty, which might give you a call and have schedules and rotations and know where you work and call you when things are wrong. But more than that, we can tool chain, and when an incident happens, it sends a message out to Slack, it opens something on the status page, and it's also easy to visually drag and drop and put it all together. So please, we're delighted to sponsor this. If you want to have a quick free X Matters play for a dev team, go for it and enjoy it. Any questions, just have a word with me afterwards, or my colleague Adam is also there with an X Matters t-shirt. And yeah, grab some freebies and try the free thing. Thanks very much. On with the meetup.
I'm going to speed things to start my talk. If we're all good. Cool, hey everyone. I want to talk to everyone today about Kart CSS. So this is going to be a pure CSS game. It's not got a single line of JavaScript. It's got a couple of lines of HTML, so not 100%, but whatever. You can count up to lines of HTML on one hand, so fine. And yeah, I'd like to say that I also put this together like a very last minute, and that's why the Photoshop's so bad, but I spent a long time with that. I'm at StephenCookDev on Twitter. I've linked to a slightly longer version of the game on my Twitter account, so you can go there just because some of the extra features are a bit too long to go through. But just a tiny bit more about myself. I work as a front-end engineer at a company called Thread. So Thread sell clothes online, basically. We have a load of stylists and like clever data science and stuff to like suggest you clothes and outfits that you would like. And if you're wondering why I'm making a talk about Mario Kart, given I work in a fashion company, let's move right along. So, first of all, what is CSS? And I guess most people here already know what it is, but just as sort of step back, just to sort of get an overall, like what does it do at a high level? And basically it's these two things. It, first of all, lets you select something as a dump. So if you say p.foo, it's going to find you any paragraph tag with class name foo. Good enough. Next, it lets you style it. If you say background color red, it will make all those paragraph tags have a background color red. Cool. There's a few extra things that you could say don't come into this description, like pseudo elements and stuff, but it's not so important. I'm basically just sort of trying to get to the fact that this is not the correct tool for making a game, right? Like a game needs arbitrary state management. It needs controls to be able to update that state, and it needs that state to then be able to generate arbitrary content to put to the screen. none of which are the things that I just said CSS does. So why are we doing this? Part of it is just because it's fun. The part of it as well is, I started out this project originally basically to sort of see how far we could push CSS and hope to learn a few things along the way, which I did in trying to do this. I think it's always a good idea when you're trying to learn something a bit better or learn something from scratch, just to sort of try something stupid and just see how far you can push it, sort of find the boundaries of that language or tool. So we're going to start off with box shadows. Can everyone at the back read the code okay? Yeah? Cool. So CSS lets you do box shadows. Thank you.
Is that Kart?
That's perfect. Perfect. Cool. Yeah, so you can do box shadows in CSS. This does seem like a weird tangent. I promise this gets back to the game. But for now, you can specify an offset, how much blur you want, and the color of that box shadow. Cool. You can also just keep going. You can comma separate these, and you can just have as many box shadows as you like. Cool. If we go a bit further, we can also actually just specify a blur radius of 0, which means that you don't get a blurred box shadow, you just get the original box. So, you know, if you have a box that is your div, then you just get lots of these boxes. And you can just line these up if you wanted. And I mean, while we're lining them up, why don't we just keep going and give them all different colors. And this part, we're basically making an image, right? An image is just a collection of pixels with positions and colors. An image also has really intelligent encoding, so make it performant, which this does not do. So we'll ignore that. We're not going to do this in production. But let's see if we can make something. Cool. So can everyone see this at the back? Is that okay? Yeah? Might get a bit bigger anyway. So this is just a file we're going to be editing. It's going to change this page. The first thing I'm going to do is basically just make this one div and we'll call it Mario, because we want to make a Mario character. Now, the first thing we want to do is just make this div be a width and height of 1 pixel. The reason for this is each box shadow is just going to be the same size as the original element. And because we're trying to do pixel art, we want 1 pixel size. The next thing we want to do is specify, now the box shadow, now we want to specify all the pixels of this Mario image that we're trying to put in. So this Mario image is about 1,000 pixels big. And apparently me manually typing that out is boring. So instead, we're just going to use this Mario box shadow SCSS variable, which we're going to get from this common SCSS file. You don't need to worry too much about what this is. It's literally just a collection of SCSS variables that are used to cheat slightly throughout the talk. So if we go back now to this, you can see we've got a little Mario sprite. Let's make that a bit bigger. Cool. So we've got a nice picture of Mario. What we can do now is if we keep going with that, I'm not going to go through the code too much here. It's all the same as what we were just seeing. It's the same thing again, but now we're just going to do it for a few more elements. So I'm going to first just make an output element. This is going to be like our screen, basically. So it's going to be the entire canvas for the game. Next, we're going to have Mario. But we're also going to have a road and some trees. Cool, so you see, we've got a nice little image. And that's all just the box shadow thing that we're talking about, just done in a really unperformed way. But that's boring, right? Like I said, we're going to make a game, and an image is not a game. So let's try and add some basic animation. Fortunately, CSS lets you do animation really easily. It has this animation keyword. So here, for example, we specify some keyframes that basically just say we want to go from a load of CSS properties, so like from opacity 0 to opacity 1 and rotation. And we're specifying as well how much we want the animation to loop, so we're saying infinite here, and how long we want the animation to last, so this is 3 seconds. You can also specify timing functions. So an example of a timing function here is the steps function. It's a bit of an uncommon one you may not have come across, but basically what it's doing, if you think about just a regular linear animation, steps one just follows the exact same overall length, but it just jumps at each step. So in steps 4, it would jump across 4 times to keep up with length 1. So let's try and add in some animation. So if we go back here, next thing we're going to do is just grab. So this is a keyframe. So we're going to add to Mario. So I'm aware this is a bit of cheating for sort of live coding, but it's a Stack Overflow method of live coding. It's fine. So we have this driver shape, which is taking us from a scale of 1 and to a scale of 0.97. And if we get Mario to animate that, steps 2 and infinite, basically it's just going to get him to jump up and down from maximum height to about 0.7 height. And the reason for this is maybe a tiny bit subtle for people at the back, but basically just makes it look like his engine is on. Just a nice subtle animation, but subtle is boring. Let's do something a bit bigger. So here we've got a load of trees. So we have our 2 trees. We have we're actually using some pseudo elements for the left tree and the right tree. So we've got before and after for left and right. So what we can do is add in these keyframes. We have left move, right move, and fade. So left move and right move are basically just bringing in the trees to say start, shrunk down in the distance, and slowly zoom in to make it look like you're moving towards these trees. And then we also have fade because if they suddenly jump in the distance, it looks weird, so we just fade them in as well. So if we now say tree left move, 3 seconds, infinite linear, and then we also want to tree fade is cool, right? Yeah. 3 seconds. And we want to do the exact same thing for the right tree, but we'll just call it tree right move. So now, cool. So you see we've got these trees coming in from a distance, so we've got a bit of movement. It does look a little weird at the moment, though, right? Like at the moment, these trees are in unison. It's a bit, you wouldn't really expect that in real trees. So why don't we get them to be slightly out of sync from one another? So we can do this thing called animation delay. So say animation delay on the right tree, so it's just 1 second out, basically. And this is going to work, but if you notice the right tree right at the start, you see it just hung about for the first second because it didn't have any animation. Now it looks okay, like now it's sort of out of sync, what we wanted. But it'd be great if we could just get rid of that first initial weird 1 second hang. But what we can actually do, and it's a real easy change, this should just say -1 second. And what it's going to do is basically when the page loads, it pretends that the tree was already animating for a second, so it's out of sync, but it never actually had this delay. And a lot of people seem to think that that's like a weird hacky bit. But honestly, that is not the hacky bit of this talk. it's actually perfectly in spec. This is a quote from the W3 spec for animation delay. Negative delay is actually expected, and this one's fine to use in function. Yeah. So that was a nice simple animation. But if we want to have something like this, where we actually want our drivers to be turning, this is suddenly feeling a lot out of the realm of CSS, right? Like this isn't a rotation. This isn't. I mean, like you can't change right and left to get this to happen. So how do we get this sort of effect? And if we break down what's actually happening here, so it's a bit small. But if you think about that animation, you can actually think about it in terms of each single frame of what that animation was. And once you have that, you can think about how sort of old movies work, where so old films literally have lots of different pictures, and then it runs up to say, to sort of simulate this idea of movement. And we can do the exact same thing. And if we use the steps function that we were looking at before, we can make sure that as long as we're including the rest of that film that we had, then you can see on the right hand side we've got what we want. We just speed that up. That is the animation that we want. So we need to make sure that we're including the entire sprite sheet. So we have all of the different pictures of Mario, but we only want to show one at a time. So we can't keep just using the div to have all these box shadows. What we need to do now is, and it's a small change, So whereas at the moment we just have our individual div, which has all the box shadows, we're going to change it slightly to say that the div now is just the width and height of the entire image, and then we're going to create a pseudo element inside of it, which is going to hold each individual pixels. So the pseudo element here is exactly what the div used to be, and the div is now just a container with overflow hidden, so that anything outside of that container is not visible. So that's a lot of talking. Let's see if we can get Mario turning. So let's copy paste some more code. So here, this is just, as I say, getting the Mario, whereas currently Mario is actually containing all the box shadow information. Now we're not wanting him to contain box shadow information. We're just going to say that he's 50 pixels high, because we explicitly need to set that now so that we can hide everything else. But now we don't have any of the box shadow stuff in there. We're going to get that instead from this, which is, so this, as I say, like this before element is just setting up the exact same thing as we were doing before, but it's using the sprite sheet now, so all of the pictures of Mario rather than just that one picture of Mario. And then we're going to have this sprite animate function, which is going through steps. It's going to go through however many frames there are. So we're saying that there are five frames. So we want to use that to work out how many steps of the animation we want. Otherwise, you'll get like halfway in between 2 frames. And we're going to go animate that between 0%. We're going to be just at the normal top. Halfway through the animation, we want to be right at the top of that sprite sheet. So we want to move it all the way to halfway. And then we're going to move it back down. And the reason for this is that the animation sprite sheet is just Mario turning. So when we bring it back down again, it's him going back to neutral. One extra thing we need to do is just make sure that because before is a pseudo element, it doesn't actually exist in the DOM, so we just need to content empty string and display line inline block, so it's actually there, and then width and height of 1 pixel. So if we get page refresh now, see, we've got Mario, and he's turning, which is cool, but again, it's not a game. Games are interactive, right? Like, you can't just watch Mario turning, that's boring, okay? So how do we actually get some interactivity in? Fortunately, on the web, we have a keyboard input as like a very normal thing that used to do it. So we can use WASD, so get A to turn left and D to turn right. And the immediate thought is that, oh, why don't we just use some CSS that basically, you know, if we have our text box here, why don't we have some CSS that says, you know, check for input and see if it has value A, and if so, do something, and if it has value D, do something else. Which is a really good idea, except it doesn't work. Which is a downer. And the reason it doesn't work is basically because there are 2 different types of values on inputs, which is a bit unintuitive. Basically, if you had some HTML where you said input type text, value equals foo. So the input loads up, it's got value equals foo, as you expect, and that's both values of foo. But if I type in bar now, this has a value of foo bar, but the attribute value of the input is still foo. So like if you were to look at inspector or something, like the value that you see in inspector is still foo. We could write some JavaScript that sort of syncs these things up by basically saying whenever the input changes, like just set the attribute value to match up with what our current value is. We could do this, but I said at the start of this talk, we're going to do any JavaScript, and it sort of reminds me of, I was moving, I helped my friends move recently, and it was one of those classic moments. You pick something up and thought, I can carry this. They said, are you sure that's really heavy? I was like, no, honestly, it's fine. It turns out they lived on the 2nd floor, but I felt like I'd already said I'm fine, so I sort of felt like I had to stick to that. I broke a lot of things that day. But fortunately, I actually did manage to get around it on this particular problem. I found out that there are these two placeholders called valid and invalid. So these are quite uncommon, you may not have come across them. But basically, if you specify on your input, you can say something like pattern, and you can specify a regular expression here. So here we're just checking to see does the input contain a pattern of something is the text correct? and then if it is, make it green, and if it's not, make it red. So you can see I start typing in, and it doesn't meet the regular expression requirements of correct, so we get border color red. As soon as it does though, it becomes border color green. So that's great. We've got, CSS responding to text input, which is what we're going for. We can add in a third state as well, so we can have, if you use the CSS selector placeholder shown, then if your input has a placeholder, then you can say get that to override the valid and invalid attributes. So we can say placeholder shown, border color gray, state 1. Start typing, we've got our second state. Finish, and we've got our third state. So we've got 3 states, right, which is sort of what we want. We want the idea that you're not pushing, you're not doing anything on the keyboard. That's placeholder shown. If we push D, so here our pattern is just saying anything that ends in the letter D, that's right. So we push D and it says, yeah, that's correct, or in other words, you're turning right. If I push A, it says, you're not pushing D, so you're turning left. And this keeps working. You see we've got dynamic input based entirely on CSS. It does have a small bug. The eagle eyes of you may have noticed that if I said W, for example, it says, you're not pushing D, so you're pushing A. Yeah, but it's, sorry? It's not the, sorry, I can't quite hear. But yeah, this is fine anyway, because users will always do what they're told if you just tell them to push only A and B. So let's get that bit in. So the first thing we want to do is type text. So we do actually need a placeholder, even if we don't want one, otherwise placeholder showing doesn't do anything. And then we want that pattern in, which is saying look for anything as long as it ends in the letter D. So that's going to get our input in, but we actually need that to be interactive. So the first thing we want to do is just make sure we have our sprite animate, but we also want sprite animate mirror. So fortunately, this picture of Mario that we have is symmetrical down the middle. So if we just literally mirror the entire animation, then rather than turning right, he'll be turning left. So now we have 2 different keyframes, one for turning left, one for turning right. The next thing we can grab is this code, which is just going to help him stick. So what this is saying is, if you can find an input valid, then look for the Mario before element that comes afterwards, and make it turn left. And if you can find one that is invalid, make it turn right. And so this is exactly the same animation as what we had before. It's just we can get rid of that now because we're doing it down here. But yeah, it's just now based on this input. And when the placeholder is shown, so you haven't pushed anything, don't animate at all. So if we look at that now, you can see we've got this little input in the top left. And if I push D, Mario turns left. I push A, he turns, right and then left. But he's still very much stationary, so there's one more thing we can do, which is, so this was an animation on the before super element, or the box shows up. But now we can just do a similar thing on the container element, and we can literally just say transition and margin left. And again, if it's valid, make him go to the right, and if it's invalid, go to the left. Which then gives the effect, if we push A, we've got Mario turning right, and A, he's turning left. Now we can keep this going, and we've got a nice Mario game. So there's a few bits and pieces more that you can add to this, but and I don't want to do this on Twitter, but I'll stop now, as well as I'm sure everyone's got the Mario Kart again. But yeah, you can find the links to that on my Twitter. Thanks very much for listening.
Any questions? Any questions? Okay. That's all.
Thank you. You know, your game looks really cool, but have you thought about Internet Explorer users? What they're
Sorry, what was that?
I mean, like the placeholder show. I support
nothing else on the other side.
across the different browsers.
Cross-browser compatibility was your thing.
Nothing else is the
Yeah, so I'll be honest, like the performance implications of this of the code that we're looking at. This barely works on like modern Firefox, so in terms of cross-browser, no, it doesn't. As I say, like a lot of this stuff in this talk, don't do this in production, please.
Two quick question. What tool did you use to build actually all the pixel art that you did? Don't tell me you did it manually.
You know, I mentioned it to someone else, and someone else genuinely thought I did it manually, and I'm insulted that people think that I do that. No, I very fortunately, I found a tool online where you can literally just upload an image, a PNG bitmap image, and it converts into box shadow. It's a bit of a hidden tool. I was really worried that I was going to have to make it myself, but fortunately, no. If you Google about for like bitmap to box shadow converters, other great people on the internet have already made that.
I see that you opted to do the animation using basically typed images as it was in our school. Have you considered putting a transition to each single shadow that you created to see if that was a bit more smooth or not? I know it's not the same feeling that you will get, but that was pretty cool actually.
A transition to each.
So from each state, each pixel will move to a different position, composite an image.
Yeah, so I think that would be quite hard to manage all of the.
I was just wondering if you tried and if it was smooth or not, or it was too demanding.
I never tried, so it'd be interesting to give it a go, yeah.
Okay, anyway. Nice also to bring something like this in a JavaScript identity.
Any more questions?
Okay, so we have our last talk for So I think the talk you did today, you are doing it again in Vienna. You did it last year in London in Halfstack, which is in November. So was that an extended talk?
If anyone has any extra ideas that you want to add to the game for the talking in Vienna, let me know. I'm all up for extending it. Can't get online on Neutkens there so much as I try.
Internet Explorer?
I use it support, yeah.
Any ideas? You have any ideas for the Super Mario? What would you do?
State management.
Whether go outside the roads.
Multiplayer. Make it crash.
You have points maybe. I think there's a counter increment in CSS.
Oh, what, sorry?
I think there's a counter increment in CSS which we can use to have some kind of points for the game.
You can make points.
Yeah, I think the only thing is it's always collision detection. It's like if you need to work out if you're colliding into a box or something, you get the points. You can time it to work out lap.
Open source it and get people to work on it.
Okay. Already works on that. Is this working? Yeah. Can everyone hear me all right? Good? Okay. So
Okay.
I have one question too for you, which is that, I have to, anyway, but it's like, I basically had a question for all of you. Who's going to ship to production the Mario Kart?
Sorry, can you make it louder?
Yeah, it's probably somewhere here, I guess. Wait, let's see. It's probably like slightly up, or it's test.
I can hear, but this is
I can share it. This is way louder, by the way, than what it was. Good, yeah. Very good to say it's otherwise. can just shout to everyone. Better now? Great. Yeah, so I was saying, so we're going to ship this to production, Mario Kart plus Easter eggs or something in your website, like you push on a certain button or something, or for a 4-page and suddenly it's Mario Kart. And that's clean. There's companies that actually have Easter eggs on their website, and it's really crazy. I can show it after the talk, but yeah. Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Tim. I'm not from here, I'm from the Netherlands. Hence why my accent is kind of weird for here, but anyway. And I work for a company called Zeit. You should look it up, it's really interesting. I already saw our tools like mentioned in all your talks, so it's really funny. But yeah, I work on this thing called Next.js, and I'm going to tell you about it today. So yeah, let's dive right in. So generally when you start building websites, which most of you probably do, if you're not like an AI engineer using JavaScript or something, I don't know, you start with some kind of component system, right? Because you want your code to be really consistent across like all these pages that you're building. You don't want 5 versions of the same button and then like 10 versions of the header. Some companies have 300 versions of their header. I'm not kidding, it's literally a thing. But yeah, you want some component system to help you manage that, right? So there are some libraries in this space, like UI libraries, right? So you have React and Angular and Vue and all these other tools, Svelte. But let's say for the sake of everyone knows React, I suppose. Let's use React, right? So has everyone heard of React before? Can we do a show of hands? Everyone's nodding, but like probably everyone. If you didn't, it's fine. I can do a really simple introduction to it. My slide is actually one of the introductions, which is React is pretty simple-ish. There's people that are going to disagree with me, but like it's pretty simple. Because the most basic React component is just a JavaScript function that returns HTML, JSX basically. So you do h1, hello world, and it just works. However, going to production with React is really complex actually. So oftentimes when you start building your project and you like, oh, let's use React. It feels like this, like you're almost ready to implement your hello world React app, right? So you have to set up all these things like Webpack and Babel and like, I don't know, you have to make sure that you're optimizing for production and like, there's so much stuff to go into basically. And in reality, it's gotten a lot easier through tooling and like all these other things that the React team has been doing, and you have dev tools and like really good visibility on like what's going on. You have React hooks now, which everyone loves. But going to production is still really complex. So generally you need some kind of framework for React that can scale with your project. Because React is in a really interesting position where it's only a UI library and it handles one thing really well, which is rendering to pages. And the only problem there is that it's really hard to build production-grade apps using just React. Because you can only render UI using React, and you have to invent all these other things to make it work. So generally when you start building a website, you start off with some static page, maybe a prototype or something like that. Like, say you're building a marketing page, and it has to be like fast and reliable because it's static, and content changes require some kind of rebuild because it's all static pages, right? And as your project grows, pages get added to that solution, and all these pages may have different requirements. So say you go from like, you're building your marketing site, and then like some manager comes in and he's like, hey, I want to like do this dynamic stuff, and it just has to work, right? So then you're like, now we have a problem because we started this like static website and it just doesn't work. So I have to take this other framework or like this other thing to make it work, basically. So really that brings up the question, how do I make my app scale with changes, right? And furthermore, there's another problem, which is how do I make my app scale with size? So this is a small graphic that the Chrome team made on what happens when you have just one single JavaScript bundle that serves everything. It's sort of like the default if you use React. Because you just like start with an entry point, which is like your app file, and then your app file has imports for components, and all these different components render your UI. But in most cases, you're not rendering all your UI in one view, right? You're not rendering the settings page if you're going to the home page and that kind of thing. So as you can see, FCP and TTI are FCP is first contentful paint, which basically means the first time that you can actually see content on your page. And then TTY is like when the whole page gets interactive. So that means that you can click on links that do like certain stuff, your like validation of fields works and that kind of thing. And generally you just have like one big JavaScript bundle and one big CSS bundle, right? And that grows uncontrollably. Like you're always adding new code to your project. You're generally either deleting stuff because you replaced it with some new code, but it's like never going down, basically. So yeah, this is where Next comes in. And Next is a framework for React that helps you scale with these changes. And it allows you to focus on what's important, which is like all your logic that you have. Basically making money. So you start by, to start using Next, you start by creating a pages directory. This is nothing special, it's just a directory. So we create this directory called pages. And in every file in the pages directory is mapped to a route. So say you have pages about.js, it will map to /about, right? But what if you want to do like a /product/ID, like some custom, or not really custom, but like dynamic routing? Next allows this since version 9 to basically create subdirectories and then put in this special file, which is marked by brackets, that will automatically inject the ID into your file, basically. But let's back up a bit. What is a page? Because I haven't showed you a page. And it's actually just a React component. So, like I was showing earlier, you have React components in React, and it returns some HTML. And a page in Next is just a React component. So if you create the about.js file, you go to /about and you return this React component, it will just show hello world in page 1. So there's just one problem here, which is that how can you choose how pages are rendered? Because generally frameworks have, or like generally applications have different requirements. So you might want to do a server-side rendered, on-demand server-side rendered application that it has dynamic data that's like that you get on the client side, or on the server side, I mean. And then like some other page, which is like a dashboard. You might want to only a fully server client-side render. So every page can have different requirements, right? But as you can see, the Chrome team created this really beautiful infographic, which is quite complex, but let's go through it really quick. You have server-side rendering, static server-side rendering, server-side rendering with rehydration, and client-side rendering with pre-rendering, and full client-side rendering, right? All sounds really simple to all of you, right? Probably not that much. Like you have to actually look into it, like what it is and like what it does. But there's a nice overview to every single item. And there, if you look to the very last row, which is kind of it's very small from probably people in the back, but I'll go through it. It's basically what every single example of rendering targets has a different framework. So that begs the question: do I really need to use like a different framework for every single rendering target that I want to use? Like, or am I going to write my app in like 5 different frameworks and maintain those? So it feels like this, right? We're back to the I'm really confused state, basically. And this is where Next basically helps you, which is we allow you to do multiple different, per page, you can choose which rendering target you want to use. So let's first go into pre-rendering, which is you generate static HTML at build time. So this means we just created a static page, which is just, it doesn't have any blocking data requirements, so there's no fetches to get data and that kind of thing. So it's great for like marketing pages, your blog. It has great SEO because everything is static HTML, rendered on the server. And the only downside there is that content changes require a rebuild. However, this doesn't matter because this is all in your code, right? You have the HTML inside of the code already, the JS basically. Then there is server-side rendering, which means that you render when a user does a request. So every single request that comes into your server, it will do some data fetching logic, like in this case, we have this special method called getInitialProps to get all your data. And if it's there, we basically assume that the page is going to be server-side rendered. So this returns a post from Headless CMS, which is a beautiful library that does nothing but return one post. You can use it on NPM. It will just return ID 1 and that's it. But it's a story for another time. And this will serve-side render so on every request. And this is just a different page, right? We have the about.js and we have the product ID with the dynamic ID, basically. And then there's client-side rendering. So if you only want to render in the browser, you can actually also do that using Next on like inside of pages. All you have to do is create a React hook actually that triggers when something is mounted, basically. So you use like use effect and then do a set state when the use effect is called. And this works really good for like dashboards and internal applications and like your classic single-page application, basically. However, there's something more. Like, what if you want to go beyond React rendering? So Next allows one additional rendering strategy, or actually two that are similar to each other, just AMP. So I don't know if anyone of you have heard of AMP. Can we do a show of hands? It's a lot, actually. Sometimes like I give this talk to people and they're like, oh, I don't know what AMP is. This is standard created by Google that is now basically maintained by a group of companies that basically allows you to build very fast web pages. So the way this works is you have you write your code in a specific way, like the HTML. It's HTML standard, and that allows crawlers like Google and Bing and like all these other companies to index your pages and show them inside of the search engine. So this means that in Google you'll actually see if you search for Next.js, because we have AMP in Next.js.org, that it shows this lightning icon on the next to the URL basically. And this lightning icon means that if you click on it, it's going to be instantaneously loaded inside of Google without going actually to the website. It renders inside of Google using extra caching, and like, it's just really fast. And there's two ways to use AMP. So there's AMP hybrid, which means that you have Next.js React page on one side, and then you have an AMP page for like when crawlers index it basically. So when Google comes by, it will actually like index the AMP page too, but your users are never going to it directly. And this works really well if you like want to incrementally adopt AMP, for example. And then there's AMP first, which means that all the whole page will be rendered in AMP, also for desktop users and that kind of thing. And in doing so, you basically get a really fast web page that is almost instantly loaded. We optimize like a lot of different things on this. And to go back on the whole strategies a bit, so all these strategies can be combined. So the about.js could be pre-rendered to HTML plus hybrid AMP. Then the dashboard can be completely client-side rendered, and your product ID can be server-side rendered. This can all be in the same app. So you're building this one app that has all these different rendering methods. So you basically don't need multiple frameworks to do these different methods, basically, of rendering. So it's unified in a single framework, and it works for like websites and web applications, basically. And it allows you to build truly hybrid applications. However, generally, you're not just building a front end, right? For example, your website might need a contact form or like some extra logic that you want to like execute, get some data back, that kind of thing. So you need some kind of backend to handle your data that comes back from the forms. So I don't know if you ever build a backend service using Node.js, for example. There's like this almost standard thing that everyone always does, which is you create a separate project or a directory inside of your project. You install your favorite web server, which could be like Express or something like that. You create the endpoint, and you run the server on a different port than your front end, basically. So you have two servers running at this point. And every time you make a change, you have to restart your server. This is really important because if you don't, you still have the server running on the old code. And you can request the endpoint, but it will return the old code's data, basically. So if you, I've done this many times, basically where you make changes and you're requesting the API endpoint and you're like, it doesn't work. I made all these changes, it doesn't work. So you have to restart your server, and then like 10 minutes later, you're like, oh wait, I forgot to restart my server, and then you restart the server, basically. I need some extra library to handle it for you, basically. So you basically need an API server that can scale with your project. Because running multiple projects is not going to scale to above more than a few endpoints. So that means that if you have like 100 endpoints, how are you going to do? You're going to like boot up 100 different ports and then like figure out like how that's all going to tie together, right? So starting with Next.js 9, you can actually create endpoints in Next. So that means you don't need a custom server or something like that. You don't need to install Express to handle most of your logic. By just creating a pages directory with an API directory inside of it. So you create pages API contact.js. And inside of that contact.js, you can use the same programmatic usage as Express. So you get request and response, and you can do like rest.json, which returns some JSON data, but you can also send files back and that kind of thing. And some of the middle wraps from Express are also included by default, so that you don't have to configure them, basically. So you have request.query, request.body, request.cookies, which is not the default, but we include by default because everyone has it in their server. And then you end it with logged the body, basically. So the fun thing of this is that you actually get all the benefits that Next already gives you for API routes. So it's probably already playing, but I'm not sure exactly. But let's go through it. Let's see. So if you make changes to your API endpoint, it's automatically updated. So let's go through this. I hope it plays now. Okay, there it goes. So you just open the file and it says you have just a very simple endpoint. And you boot up the Next.js server, which handles your basically everything for you in terms of like compilation, that kind of thing. And then you do like you curl the API / hello, then you change it to hello world, basically. And then you save it, and then you curl again. I hope, yeah, it does that. And then you have hello world without restarting anything, without like getting out of context of what you were doing and that kind of thing. And this all just works by default. So then there is a question of you're building a front end and an API endpoint or multiple API endpoints, and they are handling data, right? They're rendering data or they're handling data in a certain way. And you can't afford them to break because like it'll be bad for your business and you lose money and that kind of thing. We all don't want that, of course. So how do you avoid bugs, basically? That's the question, right? And generally how people do this is using static type checking, like TypeScript. So who here has used TypeScript before, uses Flow or anything else in their day-to-day job? Cool. It's quite a lot of people. It's starting to catch on. It's really interesting to see that everyone is now like in this space where they want to incrementally adopt either TypeScript or Flow or like some other static typing tool. So starting with Next 9, you actually get automatic TypeScript by default. So you create pages /about.tsx, which is a TypeScript with JSX file. and that can have typings and that kind of thing. And it makes it work automatically. So that means that you don't have to set up tsconfig. Everyone that has set up TypeScript before has set up this tsconfig and had to like figure out all these options. And then they didn't know like exactly what the correct options were, and then it like sort of works, but still not really in the correct way. So we set up this tsconfig for you, and like we help you like optimize it. Basically, you can still make some changes there. And then on top of that, Next will fail to build if there are TypeScript errors that are in your app. Basically, like it can't compile at that point. And furthermore, the Next.js core is written in TypeScript now, so that means that every single file that you import has typings. So if you use a component, it will show you which props you are using. If you're using like VS Code or like some editor that supports TypeScript. And on top of that, you got just really good like type checking on those components too. So if you basically add in an extra property that doesn't exist basically in Next.js, it will also yell at you and say like, hey, you got this property that's not there. So yeah, now you've built your project, and let's fast forward into the future. Your application has grown to hundreds of pages. You're like a very successful company, or you have like a very big startup now, right? And there's one problem there. Every page that you add in like a standard tool is adding on to your build time, right? Everything gets slower basically, because compilation needs to like compile all these pages for you. So how do you solve this? And there's like some prior art here, which is Yarn basically. It's already playing, but it's really fast, so I'll just replay it. It's basically if you run Yarn. I don't know if you ever used Yarn, but it's like this alternative npm package manager. And if you run Yarn in a directory where it already has been executed before, it will finish in like 0.34, 35 seconds, which is incredibly fast, right? Because like installing dependencies is really slow. So what Yarn does is it diffs all the changes that have been made to your project since the last time it has been run, basically. And we started out on this journey to basically make something similar for Next. Like if you run multiple Next builds, to avoid rebuilding pages when there are no changes, basically. And the Next.js build pipeline will like understand which pages have changed, and then only recompile changes that are actually there, that are actually made there. So, say you have a header component that is in like every single of your, or like in half of your application. Say like it's half of the application. Then it will only recompile that half of your application, not the rest of it. So it will like cut your build times in half. But in most cases, you're not changing the header all the time, right? You're changing certain pages, and that will just bring down your build times to like 10 to 20 seconds in most cases. And that reduces your build times from hours to milliseconds, basically, right? This is still in the works and it's not out yet, but it's something that we're actively working on. So yeah, Next.js basically scales with your project. So you go from my personal website, which doesn't have that much stuff on it. If you go to it, it literally has 2 paragraphs of text and a very nice logo. To Hulu, which is a very, very big streaming company in the US. Hopefully soon in the UK and everywhere else too. It's just a really big app. So, and there's not even Hulu, but there's thousands of really big companies using Next in production to serve their main experiences, basically. So that goes from your personal website to the largest companies in the world, like literally the largest companies in the world, like Tencent, which is like the 6th largest website of the internet, for example. But also really well known here, Deliveroo, for example. But also GitHub, Zillow, which is a large housing company, Hilton, Eurostar. I took a Eurostar here. I ordered on this website. It was built on Next. It's very cool. And like Marvel, for example, and all these other companies. And specifically with Hulu, we did a case study. So you can go to this website and you can see like how Hulu approached their like migration to Next and that kind of thing. And then if you want to learn more about Next and like get really into like how everything works and like basically in a playful way get your way through like how to start using Next. I would recommend going to Next.js org/learn, which basically is an interactive tutorial where you build all these apps with Next. And it just helps you understand all the different aspects that we provide. And that was it. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Quick one. In terms of testing, does it change anything for you? There is any kind of extra test or different techniques that you find like you should use if you pass to Next.js, or it's just something like a layer on top and you just test as you will do your own React app and you don't care?
Currently, it's the same as building React, like testing React apps. So you use either do unit testing using React testing library or something like that, or you use Cypress for like integration tests, that kind of thing. We ourselves test Next using Selenium in, funnily enough, 5 or 6 different browsers. So we still do that. We really care about vector compatibility with like IE11 for the framework itself. But we also test like all these other things like fault module replacement and like all these things, all the features of Next basically. So we make sure that it never breaks between upgrades and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Any more questions?
The example that you showed before that was using hooks. Do you have examples? Are these available in the GitHub repository? Because
this one in particular not, but it's like 2 lines of code, so I can like request it in. But it's literally you do use state, you do use effect with the second parameter being an empty array. And then the function is literally set state mounted through, and that's it.
How does this work with get initial props?
Get initial props will still run on the server.
Okay.
And then return props. So if you're doing that in particular, you would want to do client-side fetches.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Cool. Yeah, so I have one more thing, which I was saying, there's an Easter egg in this Next.js website. Actually, it's a Next.js website that has many Easter eggs, and it's called Magic Leap. So I don't know if you ever heard of this, and I'm going to this website and you can't see it, so let me just fix that. Let me see. There it is. Okay. So if this still works, because otherwise, let's see. So Magic Leap is this VR glasses basically, or AR glasses, I must say. So you like look through them, but you can see like this augmented reality world. Pretty cool stuff. They use Next for pretty much everything they do. So you go to the 404 page, which is, /404, 0. So I have a MacBook Pro, and it has this funny thing in the keyboard where it doesn't allow you to press 0 anymore. But anyway, so this is really funny. So you see the light there, right? It's blinking. So I don't know if anyone of you knows Morse code. I don't. So I won't translate it, but it says something with rounds and stuff, I think. So let's just try something with rounds. Right? There's this thing opening. What is this, right? So let's accept the cookies because we're all GDPR compliant. So let's just try clicking it because like what's going on here? And suddenly you're in this different universe. And it's really cool. And it's built in Next, it uses WebGL, and they have many, many engineers that are really good at this stuff. Because they're an AR company, of course. There's a skyline of Magic Leap logos. I don't know what's happening, but like this is just really cool. But I just wanted to share it. Anyway, yeah.
All right. Okay, we would like once again to thank you, Pusher, for recording the event. YouTube for hosting us, and we have one more person that helped us, Dragan, who we occasionally add more people to JS Monthly Crew because the things that we do it can be handled by just a couple of us. So occasionally we add some more people. So thanks to Dragan for helping us today. And Eddie also Eddie and Code Mortals who did the live stream today. So thank you all. That's it for today. We hope we're going to see you at the next JS Monthly in August. Do you know what's the date? We still don't know the date, but you're going to get notified. We're going to go to a pub called Singer Tavern, which should be somewhere around the corner. So if you all want to continue chatting about anything that we talked tonight, you're welcome to join us. Thank you and goodbye. Stickers.